Good morning and welcome to the second day of Festival of the Unexplained. This morning I have the lovely Simon Entwistle joining me, and we are going to find out more about Pendle Hill, and he's agreed to tell us some fantastic stories which I know you're absolutely going to love and enjoy. With no further ado, I will introduce Simon. Thank you for joining me this morning.
My absolute pleasure. It's really nice to be involved today, really is.
Well, thank you for joining us. And on a Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, a lot of people are probably still asleep.
Yes, yeah. I was on a tour yesterday, but it's good to have to be able to tell stories in such a relaxed fashion, really, in the comfort of your own home. Really, it's lovely, really, and I'm looking forward to this very much indeed. Really am.
Well, thank you again for joining us. Would you like to tell the audience Top Hat Tours, what it is you do, and go on and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Right. Well, I conduct a variety of guided tours. My business is called Top Hat Tours. I'm the only employer, and I cover coach tours, walking tours, and a variety of ghost walks throughout the north of England into Yorkshire, Cumbria, and Lancashire. I'm really a collector of ghost stories. I'm not a paranormal investigator or indeed a medium or a clairvoyant, but I find ghost stories absolutely fascinating. And what is so nice about my job is that I'm always picking up new material all the time. And I find the best way to get a good story is to talk to eyewitness accounts. And they make the best stories. And you can always tell when someone's pulling your leg or when someone's being very, very honest. And I've got some great stories lined up for this morning.
That's fantastic. Have you got one favourite story you'd like to tell? I know not a lot, but is there one particular that you really enjoy telling more than others?
One story I really do enjoy would be, again, an eyewitness account. I live in the market town of Clitheroe in England, and we have the East Lancashire Railway that comes straight through the town. And in response to ads in the local newspaper, I had a telephone call from a marvellous chap called Bill Morris. And Bill came to my house. I made him a cup of tea. And he told me this fabulous story. He said, Simon, I was born at a place called Boardlands in Clitheroe. I had a garden which faced the railway line. There was a fence there. And as a little boy, I would sit on the fence and watch the trains come by, wave at the engine drivers, and they'd wave back at me. I told my mum and dad that when I leave school, I want to work on the railway. He left school at 14 and got a job at the railway station in Clitheroe as a wheel tapper. When the trains came in, he would just tap the wheels, make sure they weren't broken. Age of 18, he got a job as a fireman on the footplate of what we call a Black 5 locomotive. And just after his 21st birthday, he got the job of his dreams, a steam engine driver. He would go past his mum and dad's house and he would pull the communication whistle and they'd go rushing down to the garden to watch him and wave at him as he went past. On a beautiful, beautiful August day, 1953, he took the engine down from the city of Carlisle towards the city of Manchester, went past his mum and dad's house, and in between Blackburn and Manchester is a place called the Sough Tunnel. It's a very, very long tunnel. At the front of the tunnel are these two huge open green fields full of sheep and cattle. And as Bill took the engine down the line, he saw a little boy with straw-coloured hair sitting on the fence, just waving. And of course, Bill waved back at him. He knew exactly what was going through this little boy's mind because he too had sat on a fence as a young lad at the same age. He saw this young lad every single day for the next 5 weeks. He was always sitting on the fence and always waving the engine. However, in October that year, Bill took the engine down the line and saw the little boy wasn't sitting on the fence, but standing in the centre of the field adjacent to the tunnel entrance. Bill also noted he was surrounded by sheep, but the sheep were all sleeping. And when the little boy saw the engine, he started to run towards the fencing, and Bill noted he was running through sleeping sheep. He yelled with the fireman, look at that, look at that. Sorry, mate, too busy shoveling. The train got into the tunnel, They got to Manchester, changed the freight over, and the fireman said, "Bill, you've been very, very quiet. What's the problem?" "Well, it really worries me. You know that little lad who sits on the fence near the tunnel entrance with straw-coloured hair? He was in the field today. When he saw us, he started to run, but he was running through sleeping sheep. The sheep didn't even know he was there." "No, Bill, you're seeing things," said the fireman. They changed the freight over, made their way back up north, and as the train was about to enter the tunnel from the Manchester side, Bill noted in the distance a red light. He slowed the engine down, and there he saw the light was being held up by a sergeant, a police officer. He slowed the engine down and shouted from the footplate, "What's wrong, officer?" "Oh, terrible, terrible. There's been a young lad killed at the entrance to the tunnel." "Oh, Sergeant, that's terrible," said Bill. "It really is. He lost his brother there 5 years ago." "Oh, officer, that's heartbreaking." "Yes, we've just been to see the parents. It wasn't a pleasant job." No, it wouldn't be," said Bill. Word filtered through the tunnel. They could now take the engine through the tunnel. And as Bill brought the engine out into bright, bright sunshine, he glanced to the left and saw the straw-coloured haired boy holding the hand of a much taller boy. As Bill turned to wave at them, they raised their arms, and both of them faded into thin air. Bill's hair rose on the back of his head. He elbowed the fireman. "Look at that." "Sorry, mate, too busy shoveling." Bill never saw them again. But you can always tell when someone's being very honest and very truthful. And that story came from Bill's heart. A very, very touching story, and actually one that has been indeed confirmed.
That's amazing as well, the fact it's actually been confirmed.
Yes, the accident was confirmed. But I'd say what is so nice about meeting eyewitness accounts is you can tell when someone's not pulling your leg, and you can tell when the stories are coming from the heart, really.
Yeah,
and I prefer those to reading, really. And you can read about ghost stories, but I find eyewitness accounts are fantastic, really.
So, Simon, how can people get involved with your tours?
Right, I've got a website. A website called www.tophattours.co.uk. We do Pendle Witch tours. I've got 12 ghost walks up and running, and also heritage tours and walks, etc. And COVID-19 has practically destroyed my business, actually, but I can now take groups out of 30 people. So we can do the walking tours, okay, the ghost walks, okay, but they are limited numbers. And unfortunately, I've got no coach tours booked because of the COVID-19 problem. But I'm sure they'll get it sorted. I'm sure they will.
So, those of you that are watching, I've put the link on for Simon's website. Let's give him some support. Let's share it. Let's get people involved. Get yourselves booked on some tours. And let's support him and help him because he's got that many stories. We're not going to be able to have that many told this morning. And if you're really interested, then get onto his website and check him out and get some more information.
Thank you very much.
I shall hand over back to you, Simon, for you to tell us another one of your... I completely forget that I'm actually talking to you, and I'm supposed to be conducting this, because I completely forget myself, because I'm listening to you and I'm so intrigued to your story that I forget I need to come back on and talk. So I will let you take over.
Thank you very much indeed. The next story, I call it the 44 million to 1 against. It's a beautiful story which still fascinates me to this very, very, very day. And we're going to turn the clock back now to 1960, when I was 5 years old. My dad had just bought this very, very beautiful Victorian house at a place called Kendal in the Lake District. It was just outside Kendal. Beautiful 3-story Victorian house. I arrived there in December 1960, and I fell in love with that house at first glance. Had some beautiful times there and some great memories. However, my father was going to experience something very, very paranormal. I had a brother and a sister. We were all under 10 years of age, and mum and dad made up the beds very, very quickly so we could all go to bed. Mum and dad carried on work until about 1 o'clock in the morning, unloading the tea chest of cutlery and other items, furniture, etc. And they decided to turn it in around 1 o'clock in the morning. Because it was a country house, there was no need to put any curtains up. And my father and mum got into bed. And my dad mentioned there was bright, bright moonlight illuminating the bedroom. It was almost like a silvery moonlight, as light as day. He turned over and he heard the sound of tiny footsteps. Slowly, the door of the bedroom opened and in came a liver and white cocker spaniel. He thought, how's that got in here? He walked across the dog, got out of bed and said, come on, let's have you. His hand went straight through the dog. He made a second attempt. His hand went through the creature again. The dog then turned and looked at the window as if its name was being called and then shimmered away. My father sat on the bed in a state of shock. My mother woke up startled and she said, oh, I've just had this strange dream. There's a man outside the house in Victorian clothing with a dog lead in his hand pointing up at our bedroom window. My father then told my mum what he'd experienced. Now, they didn't tell my brother, sister, and myself this until I was about 15 years old. And I found the story quite fascinating. I love that house with all my heart. I went to primary school there, secondary modern school there, and had some lovely, happy memories. And it broke my heart in 1973. And my father sold the house and we moved to a small bungalow in Kendal itself. However, this is where the story takes a real sinister twist. 4 years ago, my wife and I went on a P&O cruise to the Mediterranean. Absolutely loved it. They had what's called a black tie event, and I went down to the restaurant at night time with a dicky bow tie on with my wife. And about 2 tables away, there was a very, very beautiful young lady that kept looking at me. And I thought, I really cannot be that good looking. As it happened, she knew me and she walked across and said, it's Simon, isn't it? I said, that's right. She said, I live in the village of Chapman near Clitheroe. Oh, yes. I've been in your guided tours, Simon. I quite like them. Have you ever thought about doing a PowerPoint show on the cruise ships? I said, well, Louise, that's her name. Louise, surely people want to hear about ghosts, murders and mysteries. Oh, you'd be surprised, she said. I'll give you an email address when you get back to England. I got back to England and the email address was waiting for me, P&O Cruises, for an audition for PowerPoint. So I sent off the email. 3 days later, I got a reply. And I was quite shocked. I could have gone down to Sussex to audition or to Cumbria. Now, of course, Lancashire and Cumbria are very close, so I thought there's no sense in going to Sussex. So I said, I'll go to Cumbria. I was given a telephone number and a sat-nav code, and I telephoned a lady called Maureen. And she said, Simon, bring your laptop, bring your projector and your stories, and I shall audition you at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at my home. I'll give you the sat-nav code. I put the sat-nav code into my car and found myself driving over what's called the Trough of Bowland, beautiful scenic area, down into the city of Lancaster, and then up towards Kendal. And I was seeing familiar fields, familiar landmarks. I then went to what's called Heversham Head, this beautiful limestone outcrop with trees and a gorgeous lane through the centre of it, past my old primary school, and then straight up the driveway to that house that my dad sold, where my heart still was. I got there and I knocked on the door, met Maureen, the cruise director, and she said, Simon, you look a bit jaded. I said, Maureen, I know you won't believe this, but I used to live here. The last time I was in the house, I was only 15 years old. Oh, right, she said. Well, come in. I went into the front room and thoughts my mum and dad came back, have both passed away, of course. My brother who's passed away. And thoughts came back and I could hardly concentrate. Maureen made me a cup of tea. I then told her about my father's ghostly experience with the Cocker Spaniel. The teacup fell through her hands, smashed at her feet. Her eyes widened in shock. And she said, Simon, my brother lives in London. Every Christmas, he comes up to spend Christmas with me and my husband. The very, very first Christmas, he was in bed upstairs in what would have been your mother and father's room. The door opened and in came a liver and white spaniel. I looked at the ceiling and said, thank you, Dad. Thank you. He really did see a ghostly dog. A beautiful story, that, actually, and one I've never, ever forgotten. And as I'd swear to you, it is 100% true. It really is. Although 44 million to 1 against.
Wow, that's amazing. You literally couldn't write that you'd land up getting back to that property. Of all the properties in the country, you go back to one. You go to that exact one. That's just amazing.
It's almost as if that house wanted me back again. And as Maureen made the cup of tea that she went into the kitchen, I sat down on the sofa in what would have been my old sitting room. And it's almost as if I could feel like air across my face, and almost as if there was something there, something that wished to get my attention. But it was a welcoming feeling. It was a welcoming feeling. It really was. But it's a beautiful story. It really is.
That's amazing. Well, I'm going to have to ask you to tell us one of your wonderful Pendle Hill stories.
Of course.
I'm sure people are waiting for one of those, because a lot of our watchers will be also watch The Sanctuary. So I'm sure they're sat waiting with bated breath for a Pendle Hill story.
Right. Well, the Pendle Witch story is quite fantastic, really. It's the sort of story that if Steven Spielberg got his teeth into it, he would have a Hollywood movie. The only window on the whole story is a book written in 1613 called The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in Lancashire by Thomas Potts. Who was Thomas Potts? Well, he was sent up from London with Edmund Bromley, James Altham, 2 circuit judges, to try the Pendle Witches at Lancaster City Castle. There's a lot more to the story than meets the eye, so we'll turn the clock back in time to 1603, and at that period of time we had this fantastic queen on the throne of England called Queen Elizabeth I. Now, she led by example. She was loved by the people of England, defeated the Spanish Armada in 1588, and many historians believe she was our finest ever monarch, a magnificent woman who led from the very, very front. When she died in 1603, she was replaced by a completely different character called King James VI of Scotland, who then became King James I of England. This man was absolutely paranoid about witchcraft. He not only believed that witches existed, he believed they were actually out to get him. On becoming King of England, he wrote a book you can buy today in paperback, called The Demonology Book. And as you pick it up, chapter 1, how to find a witch. Chapter 2, how to try a witch. Chapter 3, how to eradicate a witch. Throughout the whole length of Great Britain, the area known as the Forest of Pendle seemed to stick out like a sore thumb. That part of East Lancashire was predominantly Catholic. The king was an ardent Protestant, hated the Catholics with a vengeance, and he blamed Catholicism and witchcraft as the same thing. Therefore, he told all his magistrates all over Great Britain to watch out for illegal Catholic gatherings, but also witches. He put the two together. Living in the Forest of Pendle beneath this huge hill called Pendle Hill in 1612 were 2 very elderly women, Elizabeth Southern and Anne Whittle, commonly known as Demdike and Chattox. That was their nicknames. Both women had defied the laws of nature. They were both over 85 years old. Life expectancy, if you were lucky, would be 33. These women were over 85 and doing quite well. They'd lost their husbands. In the case of Elizabeth Southern, she lived at a small cottage called Malkin Tower, which sounds great, doesn't it, really? But Malkin Tower would have been a hovel of a building, a one-stone, limestone hovel. Living with her was her daughter, Elizabeth Devise. She had 3 children, James, Jeanette, and Alison Devise. Living nearby was Bessie Chattox and her daughter, Anne Redfern. Now, Demdike and Chattox hated each other with a vengeance, because they were both involved in the same trade, which in the summer months was selling herbal remedies. And many historians believe that these women lived for so long because they discovered various plants. And of course, all modern medicines come from plants. And they were selling herbal remedies. In the winter months, of course, they had to beg. They didn't like each other at all because they both didn't like trading together, if you will. But our story really starts way back on the 18th of March, 1612, when Alison divides. Alison is Demdike's granddaughter. She's 14 years of age. She had a walk along the foothills of Pendle. There she had the misfortune of coming across a peddler called John Law. When I say peddler, John Law was basically a walking salesman. He came from Halifax in West Yorkshire. Large pack in his back, full of 1612 luxuries. He would go to these villages, which were called Blacko, Newchurch, Roughly, and Barrowford, Downham, and Clitheroe. There he would sell his wares. He was also a bit like a walking newspaper, giving information from each village, etc. He met young Alison. Alison would be dressed in rags, and she begged of him, "Oh, please, sir, you can spare a few pins to pin me clothing together, sir. Get away with you. I'm not taking me pack off for you, lass. You've got no money. You're no use to me. Oh, please, sir, you can spare just a few pins, sir. Get away with you," shouted John Law. Law felt this terrible pain down his left arm and left leg and collapsed in agony at the foot of Pendle Hill. A moment before, this large black dog had come out of the mist, out of the heather, with snarling white teeth and glowing red eyes, and the dog sat next to Alison. And the dog talked. "Alison, shall I lame him for you?" Lame him, she screamed. As a result, Law was cursed. He lay in the side of the little pathway beneath Pendle Hill for 5 hours. The kind people of Cone, a small town in North Pendle, they could see him. They got a stretcher party together, and they carried him down the slopes of Pendle Hill into an old alehouse called the Greyhound Inn in Cone, which has long since gone. There the landlord, John Edrington, spoon-fed him, cleaned him, and as Law's voice returned, he shouted, "Been cursed! Witch in the forest, a young lass with a dog. I swear to you, I heard the dog talk. She didn't league with devil. Please send letters back to me family. Tell them what's happened to me." John Edrington, the landlord of the Greyhound Inn, wrote letters back to Halifax, and John Law's eldest son, Abraham, received the first letter. "Hey, my father's in trouble. Better go and collect him." Set off from Halifax, arrived in Cone, walked into the Greyhound Inn, saw his father in a twisted and contorted state. "Father, what's happened to you, man? You look terrible." "Abraham, I've been cursed. There's a witch in the forest, a young lass with a dog. She's cursed me, lad. I want you to go and find her, bring her here, reverse the curse." Abraham must have been quite a brave lad. He set off and walked into the forest of Pendle, and there he came across Malkin Tower, this little cottage, hammered on the door opened, and there was James Devise, Alison's brother. "Can I help you, sir?" "I want to see Alison Devise. My father wants to see her." "She's in here, sir." Alison came to the door. "Right, lass, you're coming with me." She was dragged out of Malkin Tower, through the forest of Pendle, down into Cone, and into the Greyhound Inn, where she saw John Law on his sickbed. Law looked up from the sickbed. "It's you. You're witch. You cursed me last night, that dog you had. I heard it talk. You ain't league with devil, aren't you?" This 14-year-old girl, on bended knees, clasped her hands together in prayer and begged forgiveness. Strangely enough, John Law, the Halifax peddler, was about to forgive her, but not his son Abraham. "Oh no, we'll have you for this. I'm going to go and get magistrate." In doing so, he opened the 1612 Pendle Witch Trials. This is where the story does get a bit twisted. The local magistrate was called Roger Noel. He lived in the village of Reed near Burnley. He knew all about the king's paranoia relating to witchcraft. He also knew if he could incriminate this young girl, he was going to curry favour with the King of England. Therefore, he gave orders that Alison should be arrested by the sheriffs of the forest. William Hargreaves and John Proctor went out to arrest her. She was brought to Reed Hall, Burnley, where for the second time inside 24 hours, she begged forgiveness. She had no idea. She just admitted to a state capital offence of witchcraft. She gave Roger Noel a lot more information. "My grandmother, Demdike, she's a witch. So's Bessie Chattox and her daughter Anne Redfern. We have these familiars, sir. Familiars, said Roger Nowell. Yes, sir. Dogs. Tib, Ball, Fancy, Dandy. These dogs. They belong to us, sir. They came to us over the years, sir. They've taken our souls. They suckle from our flesh, but they give us powers, sir. We also go to New Church Cemetery, sir. We have taken hair and teeth off the corpses, and we make clay pictures. Clay pictures, said Roger Nowell. Yes, sir. A clay picture with human hair and teeth. We then crumble the clay effigy over the fire, sir, and people die, sir. Roger Nowell was actually not frightened. He was delighted. He had a confession. Therefore, he gave orders now for the 2 sheriffs of the forest to arrest Demdike, Chattox, and Redfern. The 3 of them were then brought to Reed Hall, where young Alison was waiting. And this huge argument erupted between all 4 of them. They remember Demdike and Chattox hated each other. Alison Device and Redfern didn't like each other either. So the blame went around the table twice. But in doing so, the 4 of them actually admitted to grave robbery, to making these clay effigies, to having these dogs that were the devil in disguise, and actually the murder of local people by witchcraft. But they all tried to blame the next person. In doing so, Roger Nowell had them all sent to the city of Lancaster, where they were thrown into what we call the Well Tower at Lancaster City Castle, which is still there to this very, very day. It's a deep underground dungeon. Not even a chink of light can get to you down there. They were chained to the floor in appalling, dark, damp conditions. On Good Friday, 1612, Elizabeth Device was very worried about her mother, Demdike, very worried about her daughter, Alison, who'd been arrested, of course, and she organised on Good Friday, 1612, what has gone down in history as the Good Friday meeting, where all the other so-called witches met at Malkin Tower. Alison's brother James slaughtered the sheep. They dined on fresh mutton. They got a large cooking vessel called a cauldron, lit a fire beneath the cauldron, and the black savory liquid inside began to bubble and steam. Into that black bubbling liquid went crushed, powdered human teeth, the odd clay pitcher, and indeed the odd human scalp. The whole idea, apparently, was to get a potion together to blow the gates of Lancaster City Castle open and rescue their loved ones. However, nothing happened. What did happen is word reached the ears of Roger Nowell, the local magistrate, and he gave orders that every single person who had attended the Good Friday meeting should be arrested immediately. When word filtered into the forest of Pendle that arrests were imminent, 4 people thought, there's no way we're hanging around. Christopher Howgate, his wife Barbara, John and Isabel Sigroves, they just left the area. In doing so, they saved their lives. The ones that were successfully arrested were none other than Jeanette Preston of Gisborne, West Yorkshire, Catherine Hewitt and Alice Gray of Cone, Elizabeth Device, James Device, and Jeanette Device of Malkin Tower, John and Jane Balcock, a mother and son, farmers, and this incredibly brave woman called Alice Nutter of Roughlee. They were all sent to Lancaster with the exception of the 2 Jeanettes. Jeanette Preston came from Gisborne, West Yorkshire, so therefore she was sent to the city of York and paraded in front of the York City magistrates. Her husband went with her, villagers went with her, and they begged for her release. However, the judges said at York, we're sorry, the king has signed her death warrant. She was dead before she even arrived here. The accusation was witchcraft and attending the Good Friday meeting. She'd been nursing her employer, Mr. Thomas Lister. He had died. She wrapped his body in a clean white sheet ready for burial. 2 days before the burial, she touched the sheeting and some fresh blood came through the sheet. This was classed as witchcraft. She made a plea of not guilty, but was found guilty before she even arrived there. She was executed in the city of York on the 27th of July, 1612, at a place called Whitmar Watmergate at the bottom of the shambles in York. A pretty horrible place where many a woman has lost her life. She became the very, very first of the Pendwitch to be executed in the city of York. In the meantime, the rest are held at Lancaster, with the exception of the young girl, Jeanette Device. She is actually at the home of the magistrate, Roger Nowell. First time in her life, she's got 3 meals a day, nice warm bed to sleep in, and also nice clothes to wear. She's never experienced such luxury. She has no idea, but Roger Nowell is going to use her to his advantage. Roger Nowell, the local magistrate, wrote to the King of England, King James I and said, "Sir, I have witches waiting to be tried in Lancaster City Castle." The king was delighted. He sent 2 circuit judges, James Altham, Edmund Bromley, and this young boy called Thomas Potts, who could write so fast. And that's why we're having this conversation, because of his book, which he brought out in 1613, called The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in Lancashire. Joining those 3 were Roger Nowell, the local magistrate, William Holden and John Bannister, 2 other Pendle area magistrates. At Lancaster City Castle, there was no defence council because no one dared defend the Pendle witches because they were taking on the King of England. But as it happened, in the case of Elizabeth Southern Demdike, she died before the trials began, but she did apparently admit to grave robbery. She had opened coffin lids, she had taken hair and teeth from corpses, and she also freely admitted to the murder of 3 local people by making the clay pitcher, of crumbling the clay pitcher. She also had a dog called Dandy, and this dog was the devil in disguise, would suckle from her flesh and give her special powers. James Devise incriminated his whole family. It was almost like committing suicide. He admitted to witchcraft himself and how he'd seen these dogs arrive and how he'd seen Demdike, his grandmother, particularly Anne Redfern, make these little clay pictures of human beings. To make sure things were going to go the way of Roger Nowell, he picked young Jeanette Devise up and put her on top of the table so the jury could see her. And her mother noted that she'd put weight on. And little Jeanette shouted, "Me grandmother's a witch. Me mother's a witch. So's me brother. So's me sister. So's Catherine Hewitt. So's Alice Gray." Her mother Elizabeth shouted, "Stop it, Jeanette. You don't know what you're saying. Have my mother removed from the court, sir. She's embarrassing me, sir." Her mother was then taken back down to the cells. As it happened, James Devise, Alison Devise, Catherine Hewitt, Isabel Roby, along with Anne Whittle and Anne Redfern, all admitted to witchcraft. They actually admitted to it. But this is where the story does get very, very, very sinister, because there were 3 people there who many people believe were totally, totally innocent. That's John and Jane Bulcock and this amazing woman called Alice Nutter. They were different to the so-called Pendle witches in the fact John and Jane had a farm, a mother and son. They had complained to Roger Nowell, the magistrate, about land disputes, about land shrinking, about cattle being stolen. And so had Alice Nutter. Alice lived in this gorgeous hall, which is still there to this very day, called Roughly Hall. It's a beautiful Grade 1 listed building. She was a wealthy woman. Now, way back in 1612, for some strange reason, women were not allowed to possess a brain. And it was believed by some men that women didn't even have a brain. And when it came to male chauvinism, women suffered terribly in this country. By far the most famous of all these so-called witches is Alice Nutter. She had asked her husband to have a word with Roger Nowell about land disputes, but nothing had happened. She also had a word with Roger Nowell about the land disputes. Her fencing was going, stone walls were being removed, and he did nothing at all. So therefore, Alice made her way to the city of Lancaster. She walked into a court session to the words of, "It's a woman! A woman! Get her out! A woman! A woman!" She grabbed hold of furniture, but she wouldn't let go. The judges said, "Well, let her have her say." In one day, she won all her land disputes fairly and squarely. And the judges said, "Mistress Nutter, you are quite right. That land is yours. You are free to go." As she left Lancaster City Castle, one person was fuming, absolutely fuming. That was none other than Roger Nowell. Alice had gone over his head and seen the senior magistrates, and as a result, he was embarrassed. He thought, "I need to get rid of that woman. Also, John and Jane Bulcock, they've been causing me grief as well. How can I do it? Witchcraft. I've got my trump card up my sleeve." And that trump card was none other than little Jeanette Devise. For the second time that morning, she was picked up and put on top of a table in the courtroom. The jury could see it quite clearly. And Roger Nowell very, very callously shouted to young Jeanette, "These 3 people here, John and Jane Bulcock, Alice Nutter, were they at your home at Good Friday in the Forest of Pendle at Malkin Tower?" "They were, sir." A look of shock and horror came across John and Jane's face and Alice. as they realised they were being incriminated for witchcraft. The three of them made a plea of not guilty, but the jury, on the evidence of the little girl, found them guilty. John and Jane were found guilty of the murder of Jean Mead of Roughly by turning her completely insane. And Alice Nutter was found guilty of the murder of Henry Mitten of Roughly because he wouldn't give her a penny. In court, Alice said, look, I don't need to beg. I'm a woman of wealth. I don't even know these people. But to use a modern term, the three of them have been stitched up. The Pendlewitch was then led out of the city of Lancaster to the pillory, horrible place of execution. They had to stand on top of trestles, ropes around their necks. As the rope was placed around Alice's neck, she very, very bravely turned to see this huge crowd gather to watch the execution. She looked down from the gallows and saw Roger Nowell holding the hand of the little girl. And she shouted from the gallows, I shall haunt you for the rest of your life. And then the stools were kicked up underneath them. These poor people did not hang, they strangled to death. Young Jeanette Devise watched her whole family perish that day, the two inhabitants of Cone, the landowners. And as they all stopped twitching the pillory, Roger Nowell said to young Jeanette, goodbye. What do you mean, sir, goodbye? Surely I'm going back to that lovely warm house of yours, sir. Goodbye. He'd used her. The following morning, Roger Nowell goes down to Hampton Court. He's knighted by the King of England and made the High Sheriff of Lancashire with a huge increase in wages. The two circuit judges, James Altham and Edmund Bromley, are also knighted. Thomas Potts writes his book, The Wonderful Discovery, which earned him quite a lot of money, actually. It really did. And that's the only document we got relating to this whole story. However, young Jeanette, she got back to a cold and empty cottage. And that poor girl must have looked at the walls and thought, I've lost my entire family because I've been duped. 3 years later, this little girl, who was now probably 14 by then, was rearrested on a charge of witchcraft. Sent to the city of Lancaster, the poor girl was stripped naked and examined, down to London, stripped naked and examined, back up to Lancaster, stripped naked and examined again for marks on her body, etc. A young boy called Edmund Robinson said he'd seen her commit acts of witchcraft in the forest. 3 years later, he said, actually, I didn't see her do anything at all. So he could say that witchcraft, or the superstition surrounding it, absolutely destroyed that young girl's life and the three local farmers. As for the case of Elizabeth Southern, Anne Whittle, Isabel Roby, and indeed Catherine Hewitt, Alice Gray, they all actually admitted to witchcraft. What we do find amazing is when the snows come to Pendle Hill, the last piece of snow to melt has always been the perfect shape of a white witch. So after this talk, do go into Google search and put the White Witch of Pendle, and you'll see the last piece of snow melting on Pendle Hill in the perfect shape of a white witch. And if you were to visit Pendle Hill on Halloween, it looks more like Wembley Stadium, because thousands and thousands and thousands of people from all over Great Britain and Europe and the USA will go to Pendle Hill in the hope that they will find a Pendle witch. And there we have the Pendle Witch Trials of 1612.
I was just so engrossed then, I forgot I needed to come back on. I told you, I get lost in your stories. I suddenly realised you stopped talking. I thought, oh, I need to come back. We had a question while you were talking. Let me find it now. Well, I'll tell you some of the comments that we've had, and then I'll ask the question that's further down.
Very good. Yeah.
Melanie says, I could listen to these all day. Amazing.
Very nice.
John has posted, don't forget, they can also watch you on YouTube. So this will actually be on YouTube as well. So this will stay on our YouTube channel as well as on our Facebook page, if anybody missed the beginning or anything. The link on screen is for Simon's website. I will leave that on there for the entire time. Jane Hartley says, love listening to Simon. Jeanette said, always love listening to Simon's stories. They got me through my lockdown workouts in the morning.
Great stuff.
It's a little bit different. Wow, Tasha Brown, wow, that was amazing. Nigel Webster, awesome. Sue Bevan says, brilliant. So everybody's literally so enticed by you. And like I said, I think they're all like me. Just love listening to you. Gary would like to know, Simon, do you know if there's a link with Pendle Hill? If Pendle Hill has a link around Bolton Abbey. When I was there at the Abbey last time, could see a drowning in the stream, felt drawn to someone, then claiming it was a witch. There was a witch at the Abbey.
Bolton Abbey, absolutely gorgeous location, not too far from Pendle, actually. In fact, I think from there you might just catch the top of Pendle Hill, really. As far as stories from Bolton Abbey go, one story which I do recall, it had nothing to do with witchcraft, mind you, but of a chap called John Padstow. And shall I tell the story?
Why do I know that name?
John Padstow. He was an author. He was actually a Victorian author. And John would think nothing in the Victorian period of planning walking routes. He was a London journalist, but he would every summer he would visit a different part of Great Britain. And he did, in fact, stay at a place called the Devonshire Arms, which is not too far from Bolton Abbey. He walked over a place called Blubberhouses from Harrogate down towards Bolton Abbey. And what he would do, he would plan his trips meticulously by writing to public houses for bed and breakfast and also times of arrival. Way back in 1874, he chose that part of Yorkshire and Lancashire. You're looking at the Lancashire-Yorkshire border there, really. And he set off walking from Harrogate over Blubberhouses and then got this little lane which would take him to the Devonshire Arms. You can imagine it's just going dark. The wind whips up a real... The trees above him are bending and blowing in the wind. And the moon comes out, this intermittent moonlight, which is illuminating the way forward. It starts to rain. And as he gets around the corner, he looks at his map and realizes he's only got about another 2 miles to walk. In the distance, very near Bolton Abbey, in the lane near the River Aire there, he can see what he thinks is a sheep just sitting in the centre of the road. As he advances towards the figure, it is not a sheep, but a young woman sitting in a pool of water, combing her hair. He tried to make vocal contact with her, but to no avail. He then realised he was looking at something very, very unusual. Quite naturally became scared and ran 100 yards ahead of the figure. He then stopped and turned and heard the words, "Oh, when will he come?" He scarpered as quick as he could, got to the Devonshire Arms, enjoyed a nice meal, and the following day continued with his walk. However, when he got back to London, he was fascinated with what he'd seen. And some 6 years later, he retraced his steps. He didn't see her again, but he got to the Devonshire Arms at Bolton Abbey. And at the bar there, he mentioned it. And the landlord said, "Hey, lad, looks like you've seen the ghost of Jane Gill." "Tell me about it," said John. Well, we turn the clock back now to 1853. And not too far from Bolton Abbey was a farm called Mabbin Hall. And living at the farm was a very, very beautiful girl called Jane Gill. And she really was a stunner, apparently. Gorgeous, long black hair, of lovely figure. And all the local lads really fancied her for obvious reasons. She'd turned down thousands of wedding proposals, marriage proposals. However, she just had one heart for one man. And that was a lad called Michael Brown of Harrogate. Michael was a farmer's son. Quite a good-looking lad by all accounts, and they made plans to marry on Christmas Day, 1857, I think it was, at All Saints Church in Skipton, Christmas Day. Now, a lot of the local lads were very, very jealous of Michael because he was a good-looking lad, and of course he got the prize, this beautiful girl called Jane Gill. One night in the Devonshire Arms, a few lads gathered there, had a few pints of beer, and they discussed the wedding. And one bloke was heard to say the words, I'd like to crack that Michael Brown's skull. He's got best young lass in area." 3 days later, Michael was found dead in one of the lanes near Bolton Abbey. His horse was by his side, and when the local doctor looked at the corpse, he said, "Well, he's got lots of cranial injuries, a lot, which are not really consistent from falling from a horse. There'd just be one blow." However, there were no witnesses. It was put down as accidental death. Word went to the farm at Mabbin Hall, and Jane's father heard the news. He couldn't bear to break this story to young Jane. He couldn't bear. And so as a result, he said, she said, "Where's Michael? When will he come?" "Oh, don't worry, lass. He'll be with you soon, love. He'll be with you soon. Don't worry, don't worry." He couldn't bear to tell his own daughter that Michael was dead. Christmas Day was only 4 days away. And sadly, the wedding, of course, was postponed. And that's when Jane's father told young Jane that Michael was indeed dead. The poor girl was put into a trance of deep emotional pain. That Christmas Day evening, began to thunder and lightning around Bolton Abbey. Heavy rain came down from the heavens. And Jane tearfully rushed down the country lane, not too far from where Michael had lost his life. There, the following morning, she was found dead in a pool of water on the road. It seems she had lied face down in a small puddle, but it was enough to take her life. And so John Padstow was told this story in the Devonshire Arms some 7 years later. He wrote a book about his experiences, and the way he described it was absolutely fascinating, really. So that's the only ghost I know from the Bolton Abbey area. I can't tell you about witches there because, to the best of my knowledge, there's nothing to link it with witchcraft, but it's very near Pendle Hill, of course.
Thank you for that, Simon. Lots more comments coming in. I don't want to miss anyone, but they're coming in quite quick. Teresa Holden says, "First time watching, amazing." Christopher Evans, "That's one of the best tellings of that story I've heard in years." Tales from the Grave. Great to see our great friend Simon Entwistle's Tales from the Graves getting more well-deserved coverage. Dennis Glenn, question for you. Do you have any of these stories on Audible books? Would like to listen to them while at work. He's our ghosty postie.
Yeah, thank you very much for that comment. I have a book out called Ghostly Tales of the Unexpected. My spelling is absolutely abysmal. So what I'm doing right now is I've made some recordings, and yes, there will be an audio book, and I find the audio is a lot better than printed material because you don't need to use your brain. You just talk, really. There's no punctuation marks there or spelling mistakes. That will be going out on Amazon very, very, very soon. And I aim to have, shall we say, a whole array of stories on Amazon, which of course can be downloaded and listened to, because I'm really, really touched by these comments, actually. I'm really, really touched because I do love storytelling, and it's nice when you get a lovely audience out there that enjoys stories, really. And as I said before, there's nothing better than a good ghostly tale to get people's imagination going, really. I do visit schools from time to time, and I was at a primary school quite recently, and I said to the teacher, "I hope they don't mind blood, gore and horror." I said, "Oh no, more the better, really." But I was quite diplomatic with some of the stories, of course. But one teacher said that we wish we could get the same response from mathematics and English. But I love what I do. I really do. Yeah, thank you.
That's the thing, you can see and you can hear it in your voice how passionate you are about what you do. And that makes such a massive difference. And I'm so glad you said you are doing that. And doing
yes.
Yeah. It really hits you so much more. It wouldn't be the same read. For me, I wouldn't feel the same reading what you'd written. I think to hear your voice and the passion in it, in the way you emphasize your words and the way you tell it, that's what draws you in. And it just, yeah, I'm with you on that, Dennis. Gary says, going back to Bolton Abbey, He said that apparently there's been many sightings of females there, ghostly females.
It sounds fascinating. What I would love to do myself is do some reading there, or perhaps go and visit the area, and therefore get an insight into it. But it is a gorgeous area. Bolton Abbey is beautiful. I do know that one of Yorkshire's most famous characters is actually buried at Bolton Abbey. And that's none other than the great Freddie Truman, one of the most famous fast bowlers in Yorkshire and English county cricket. But it's a great location. It's a beautiful area to visit.
Continuing on. Simon Entwistle's Tales from the Graves has been a colleague and friend of the Ghost Quest TV team for many, many years. Lovely to see him getting so much coverage after entertaining everyone for free during the lockdown on Facebook. Well done, Simon. Oh, yes, I did tune into some of those. John, who's part of our team, storytelling is an art. Huge before radio and TV, with people being hired to entertain in community halls and theatres. How did you first get interested in doing it?
Right, well, I owe it all really to a gentleman called John Mercer. He is a York City tour guide, ghost walk guide. York, of course, is an absolute storyteller's dream. Every nook, every cranny has a story behind it. In 1996, I joined a tour that was conducted by Tone. And the way he described the characters, I found it fascinating. What was also brilliant on that tour were people from all over the world. And at the end of that tour, I thought, you know, this man has really, really sown a seed in my imagination. So I went back to my hometown of Clitheroe, which is quite a beautiful little market town with a castle in the centre. I went to the local library. I looked at the history of the area. And then I put ads in the local newspaper for people who had seen ghostly encounters. I mixed the history with those ghostly sightings. And I've been conducting that tour in Clitheroe now since 1996. And I never get tired of it, really. But I'm always looking for a new challenge. And one thing I do enjoy, of course, is just occasionally going to a theatre and having a picture behind me of just the once of each individual story, and then bringing that picture to life in front of an audience. And you find if you get a good captive audience, you're laughing, really. In other words, people that want to listen to that sort of material.
Okay. Gary said thank you for answering.
My pleasure.
How on earth, I wondered this myself, how on earth do you remember with such detail? Your attention to detail is brilliant.
Well, on the coaches, of course, I do a lot of coach tours, and I have a microphone there, and you get so used to each story that in some ways you can actually engage your mouth whilst your brain's on another subject. You can actually do that sometimes, but it's because I've covered them so many times. I always find that with a brand new tour, that's the toughest one. The first one is always tough, but once you've done it, it's there for life, really. It's there for life. But I'm always looking for news stories, and I love the eyewitness accounts. That's the ones that I find fascinating, because as I said before, you can always tell when someone's not making up a story. Like my dad, like Bill, the fireman, and I know of many more ghostly stories from eyewitness accounts that I've talked to and respected as well, really.
Right, next one. Have you or do you ever do your Jack the Ripper storytelling in London itself?
I've been on quite a few Ripper tours in London. I went with a lovely girl called Rachel. She's a City of London tour guide, and she knows the story inside out, actually. And it is a fabulous story, of course. But what Rachel did, when we got to all the areas where Polly Ann Nichols died, where Margaret Chapman died, where Catherine Eddowes died, where Margaret Kelly died, etc., she would bring out a photograph of the area. And, of course, the whole of Whitechapel's changed so much that she had to bring out photographs. And I found that a lot of the photographs, of course, were all Victorian. And in my hometown of Clitheroe, we have these lovely little ginnels with gas lamps. And you could recreate the actual story. And of course, my job as a storyteller is to do just that. So I would take groups into Clitheroe, always at night time, and we'd go down those little ginnels, snickleways, and I would call them Burner Street, places like Duckfield's Yard, Mitre Square, and it worked very, very well because of the content in the story. Of course, it wasn't the City of London, of course, but it could have been, because it's dark and the areas I choose, and I bring all the characters in, all the Metropolitan Police, all the City of London Police, Scotland Yard Police. We bring in the witnesses, and of course the poor people that lost their lives. It is a great story, and probably one of the United Kingdom's biggest tourist attractions for paranormal tours.
Okay. John says, what a great way to start a Sunday morning. Gary says, have the story and capture. Oh, he has the story and capture in Chat It's Fate. I'll take some pictures and upload a picture on here later on.
Marvelous.
So upload that later for us.
Yeah.
Okay. Melanie says, excellent. Ghost Quest TV, brilliant lineup today, guys, and great to see you starting with our mate Simon.
I've got to say that Ghost Quest is a fantastic channel. Ben Redhead is a marvellous lad. He's an exceptionally good cameraman. And we started this series called Tales from the Grave, which, of course, is on YouTube. And we've covered some fantastic stories. So you can find that on YouTube under Ghosted Tales, Simon Entwistle, and there's a whole array of them there. So do leave a comment if you'd like to, folks, and hope you enjoy them.
And also, if you want to, guys, you can drop a link on here if you want to do that. We'd be more than happy for you to drop a link on here. It's not a problem at all. Okay. Go on. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but you know what? We can't leave now without you telling one more. Very, very good. Well, there's a lot to choose from there, really. I suppose this next story, like something a little bit different. Jack the Ripper mentioned. It's totally up to you. Sure, I'd like to use another eyewitness account story, actually. Yeah, fantastic. And, we mentioned Skipton, Yorkshire. I do tours in Skipton on a regular basis, and it's a gorgeous Yorkshire town. In fact, the capital of the Yorkshire Dales, actually. But on one of those tours, a young lad came to see me at the end of the tour. And again, we popped into a fabulous old pub called the Royal Shepherd, had a pint, and he told me a story which put a lump in my throat, actually. And he was quite emotionally charged as well. He said, Simon, I'm a fireman with the West Yorkshire Fire Service. I had a very, very good friend called Mike Aitken. We were at school together, second modern school together. We both joined the fire brigade at the same time. Now, Mike had a son. He was 4 years old, and he said to me, if I lose my life, will you please look after my son? He means the world to me. His pal, Gerald, that's his name, said, oh, Mike, you'll be okay. You'll be fine. Don't worry. You'll be fine. So, well, this firefighting business is a bit dangerous, really. Don't worry. Health and safety will be okay. Now, Mike was going to lose his life, but nothing to do with firefighting whatsoever. He had a very, very powerful Kawasaki motorbike. On his days off, he would think nothing of putting his motorbike leathers on, crash helmet, and setting off at great speed over the A59 towards City of Harrogate, City of York, etc. On a Sunday afternoon, he took the bike out and had no idea that just around the corner on the A59, a vehicle carrying scaffolding poles had just skidded off the road, and these scaffolding poles had gone across the road. He came around the corner at 60 miles an hour, and one of these poles caught in the front of his front wheel. He was spun off the vehicle, where the poor lad was killed instantly. Word reached his pal Gerald, who was deeply upset, and he thought, right, I'm going to go and see his wife straight away and see young David. When he got to the house, he saw outside the house a police vehicle. He went into the house, which he'd been on many occasions, of course, and saw Mike's wife sitting on the settee with a WPC with her arm around her, deeply upset. She looked up and said to Gerald, I can't tell Dave. I just can't tell him.
Don't worry, I will. Gerald went upstairs and saw young David sitting there with a PlayStation. He sat down next to him and very, very diplomatic put his arm around him. David, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I have to tell you this. I'm afraid your dad's had an accident. I'm afraid he lost his life this afternoon. Oh, don't worry, said young David. He's just been to see me and told me I've got to look after Mum. When Gerald told this story, it was heartbreaking. But again, just looking in his eyes, you realised he was telling the truth. And is there life after death? Well, I believe there is. And I believe there's another place after this world, folks. Thank you very much indeed.
Simon, thank you so much. That's so interesting.
Thank you for kindly having me. It's been a lovely way to spend a Sunday morning, folks. Thank you.
It's been fantastic. Thank you. Ghost Quest TV, thanks, Karen, and thanks, Simon Entwistle. The link below will take you to the YouTube channel that has lots more of Simon on there and plenty more to come. So they've put the link on there for us.
Marvellous.
And one last note from John Tolliday. It's been great listening to Simon once again. Always such a pleasure. Sue Bevan, what an amazing man. The comments have been fantastic. We've absolutely loved having you.
Thank you.
I hope that you can join us in the future.
Love to, Karen, yeah.
Melanie Nash, really enjoyed listening to you. I've literally just been lost and just sat here enjoying listening and talking, listening to your stories. It's been fantastic. And we'd love you to join us again.
Very happy to, Karen. Very happy to. Thank you.
Definitely be in contact with you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. It's very much appreciated and partaking and commenting. One last note just to say, the next live with Barry Guy, you need to go on to the Zoom link, and I've put the meeting ID on there because unfortunately he's having technical issues and not able to go live on the page. So all the links are on the feed. Thank you again, Simon. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
My pleasure, Karen. Thank you.
And enjoy the rest of your day.
Will do. Thank you.